When my daughter was diagnosed with a serious illness, my mother refused to lend me $30,000. It's sad, but we can't ruin ourselves over something that might not work. 2 months later, she bought my brother a $60,000 luxury car. Years later, she knocked on my door, and when I opened it, she froze at the sight. I always knew my mother had a favorite. It wasn't something she was particularly good at hiding. My brother, Daniel, was the sun around which our family system revolved, and I was merely a distant planet orbiting in the shadows. I learned to live with it. I built an independent life for myself. I married young. I had Julia when I was 25. My little girl with huge eyes and a contagious laugh that lit up every corner of our house. Julia was 7 years old when the symptoms started. First, it was the headaches, then a fatigue that made no sense in a child who had always been pure energy. We took her to the pediatrician, then to a specialist, then another. The words the oncologist spoke in that cold office, with diplomas hanging on the white walls, still echo in my head like a never-ending reverberation. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Treatable, curable in most cases, but it required a specific and aggressive chemotherapy protocol. Insurance covered part of it, but not all. The experimental drugs that offered the best survival rates weren't on the basic plan. The repeated hospitalizations, the co-pays, the complementary treatments. $30,000. That was the figure we were short after draining our savings and maxing out our credit cards. $30,000 stood between my daughter and her best chance of survival. We sold our newer car, took out loans, organized garage sales. Every penny counted, but it wasn't enough. Time was running out, and the doctors were pressuring us to start the full treatment as soon as possible. It was my husband who suggested talking to my mother. I didn't want to do it. I knew the answer before I even asked. But when you watch your 7-year-old daughter lose her hair, clump by clump, and vomit after every basic chemo session, knowing there's something better out there, something that could truly save her. Well, you do anything. Even humiliate yourself in front of the person who has never considered you good enough. I went to her house on a Tuesday afternoon. She lived in a nice part of the city in a 2-story house with a well-kept garden. My stepfather's car was in the driveway, a late-model sedan. I rang the doorbell with trembling hands. Mom opened the door with a smile that froze when she saw me. She could always read my desperation, and I think it made her uncomfortable. Strong emotions were never her forte, unless they were about Daniel and his achievements. We went inside. She offered me coffee. We made small talk for 5 eternal minutes. Finally, I let it all out. I explained Julia's situation, the treatments, the odds, the $30,000 we desperately needed. I told her it was a loan, that we would pay it back as soon as we could, even if it took years. My mother looked at me over her coffee cup. It's sad, but we can't ruin ourselves over something that might not work. It felt like a slap in the face. I blinked, trying to process what I had just heard. I opened my mouth to protest, to explain that the survival rates were high, that Julia had every chance of pulling through, but she held up a hand. You have to understand our position. Your stepfather is close to retirement. We have our own expenses. We can't compromise our future for medical bills that could go on for years. Besides, you have options. You can get bank loans, do online fundraisers. We're not your only alternative. But you're my mother, I said, and I hated myself for the crack in my voice. And that's precisely why I don't want to see you in debt for the rest of your life over something uncertain. Sometimes you have to be realistic, sweetie. Miracles don't always happen. I left that house with my legs shaking. I cried in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive back. I didn't tell my husband the details, only that Mom couldn't help us. He didn't ask any more questions. We got the money in other ways. A GoFundMe campaign shared by friends and generous strangers. A second, nighttime job for my husband. A personal loan with brutal interest rates. We sold almost everything of value, but we did it. Julia started the full treatment. 2 months later, I was scrolling through Facebook in a hospital waiting room while Julia slept after a particularly tough session, when I saw my mother's post. My brother Daniel was standing next to a brand new, silver Audi, gleaming in the sun. My mother was hugging him with a huge smile. The caption read, "So proud of my son. He deserves all the good things. Happy with his new car." I looked through the comments. Someone asked about the model. Daniel replied, "A6 Premium Plus." Mom insisted on helping me with the down payment. Best mom in the world. The car cost $60,000, and my mother had helped with the down payment, which was surely at least $20,000. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Something inside me broke in that moment. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't scream or cry. It was more like a wire being cleanly cut. Silent. Final. I blocked my mother on all social media. I blocked Daniel, too. I changed my phone number and didn't give them the new one. When Mom finally showed up at my house weeks later to ask why I wasn't answering her calls, I told her through the closed door that I never wanted to see her again. She protested, said I was being dramatic, that I couldn't punish her for looking after her financial future. I closed the inner door. Julia underwent treatment for 2 years. 2 years of hospitals and medicine and constant fear, but it worked. My little girl survived. Her hair grew back. The laughter returned to her voice, and I swore that my mother would never know the beautiful person Julia would become. Some bridges aren't rebuilt, some are simply burned. The years that followed were about pure survival. I'm not going to romanticize that period because there was nothing romantic about it. It was sleepless nights while Julia battled nausea. It was medical bills arriving like an endless tide. It was whispered conversations with my husband at 3 a.m., calculating if we could afford rent and medication at the same time. But it was also small victories. The day the oncologist said Julia was in remission and I saw tears in his professional eyes. The first time my daughter ran in the park without getting tired. The morning she found a new tuft of hair growing and shouted with joy. Those moments were worth every sacrifice, every extra hour worked, every meal of instant noodles. The GoFundMe campaign saved our lives. Strangers from all over the country donated $5, $10, $20. A woman from Seattle who had lost her son to the same disease donated $1,000 with a note that said, "Fight for her." I did for my son, but it wasn't enough. Let it be enough for Julia. I cried reading those messages from people I didn't know, but who understood the terror of seeing your child sick. My husband worked double shifts at the factory for a full year. I took a part-time job as an administrative assistant on top of my regular job. We slept 4 hours a night, we aged 10 years in 2, but we paid off every single cent of that treatment. Julia finished chemotherapy when she was 9. During that entire time, my mother tried to contact me exactly 3 times. The first was 6 months after our last conversation. She left a voicemail saying I was being childish and that family should forgive. The second was Christmas a year later. She sent a card with a $100 check. I tore it up without a second thought. The third time was 2 years later when she apparently heard from a mutual acquaintance that Julia was well. She sent a text message, "I'm glad the girl is better. We should talk." I never replied. Daniel never reached out either, not even to ask about his niece. I guess he was too busy enjoying his new car. The years passed. Julia grew up. She became a bright, strong preteen with a deep empathy that I believe came from having stared death in the face at such a young age. She wanted to be a doctor, she wanted to help kids like her. My heart would swell with pride every time she talked about her future. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened to me. The administrative assistant job I had taken out of desperation turned out to be at a small tech startup. I was in the right place at the right time. The company exploded. I was offered a permanent position with a better salary. Then a promotion, then another. It turned out I was good at what I did, very good. In 5 years, I went from answering phones to managing a team of 10 people. My salary tripled. We bought a new house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. It wasn't a mansion, but it had 3 bedrooms and a yard where Julia could play. We bought new furniture, paid off all the medical debt, and opened a college savings account for Julia. We didn't get rich, but we became stable. For the first time in years, I could sleep without fearing that one emergency would destroy us financially. Julia never asked about my mother. She was very young when I cut contact, and with the trauma of the treatment, those early years were a blur for her. She knew she had a grandmother somewhere, but it was an abstract concept, a figure that existed only in theory. The only real grandparents to her were my husband's parents, who adored and spoiled her and were there for every step of her recovery. Occasionally, news of my biological family would reach me through mutual acquaintances, information I didn't ask for but that people shared anyway. Apparently, Daniel had left his corporate job to start some kind of import business. Then there were rumors the business wasn't doing well. Later, I heard he had gotten divorced, that there were debts, that the Audi had been sold long ago. I felt no satisfaction hearing these things. Just a kind of emptiness, as if they were stories about strangers I once knew in another life. My mother continued to live in her nice house with my stepfather. She still posted on Facebook, though I couldn't see it. Mutual friends told me the posts about Daniel had dwindled, that there was a sadness to her page now. Photos of gardens and recipes. The life of someone filling time. Julia turned 13. She was almost as tall as me. Her hair, long and healthy, reached her waist. She played the violin. She had a group of loyal friends. She got excellent grades. She volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends. She was everything a mother could wish for and more. She was a survivor, a warrior, a child who had looked at death and won. One Tuesday afternoon, I was working from home when I heard voices outside, laughter. I recognized Julia's voice talking with her best friend who had walked her home from school. They were in the front yard, probably taking pictures as teenage girls do. Then I heard the doorbell. I put down my laptop and went downstairs. Through the side window, I saw a figure on the porch, an older woman with gray hair. My heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be. I opened the door. My mother was standing there, but she wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was fixed on something behind me in the side yard. I followed her line of sight. Julia was standing there with her friend. The afternoon sun lit up her brown hair, creating a golden halo. She was wearing her school uniform, holding her violin case in one hand. She was laughing at something her friend had said. Tall, healthy, radiant, vibrant, completely alive. I turned to look at my mother again. Her face was pale, her mouth agape, her eyes wide with absolute shock, a hand on her chest as if she couldn't breathe. She was completely frozen, staring at the child she had written off. The granddaughter she never expected to see again. The life she had given up for lost. Julia noticed the attention and looked toward the door. She frowned slightly at the strange woman staring at her. She raised a hand in a polite but confused wave before turning back to her conversation. My mother finally looked at me. Tears were streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "She's alive," she whispered, her voice broken. "She's so beautiful, so healthy. You did it. You really did it." "Yes," I said in a cold voice. "We did it." We stood there on the threshold. She, on the outside looking in, at the life she never knew. Me, on the inside, protecting everything I had built without her. "I need to talk to you," she said finally. "Please." I let her in. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe I needed to hear what excuse she would have now that she'd seen Julia alive and well. We went into the living room. She sat on the edge of the sofa as if she were afraid of breaking it. I remained standing. She looks beautiful, my mother said, looking toward the window where Julia was still with her friend. So healthy, so happy. Yes. An uncomfortable silence. She wrung her hands. Look, she began. I know I have no right to be here. I know that when I told you about Julia, I thought. I don't know what I thought. Daniel always said you exaggerated things, and I believed him. I was an idiot. Aha, I said, crossing my arms. I tried to contact you after, when I heard Julia was okay, but you had blocked me. You changed your number, and your stepfather said to leave you alone, that you had already made it clear how things stood. And yet, here you are. She took a deep breath. The tears started to fall again. I need your help. I'm desperate. Daniel. His business went bankrupt 2 years ago. He lost everything. We helped him. We poured all our savings into trying to save it. We mortgaged the house. Your stepfather had to go back to work, and his health is a mess. She paused. And I have a heart problem. I need urgent surgery. The doctors say without it, I could have a heart attack at any moment, but our new insurance barely covers anything. I need $30,000. I just stared at her. $30,000, I repeated. She nodded. I saw the moment it dawned on her, when she realized the exact number. I know how it sounds, she said quickly. I know, but I have no one else. Daniel is broke. My siblings won't speak to me. You're my only option. And I saw your house. I can tell you're doing well. I thought maybe. Maybe what? Maybe I would save you, the way you didn't save my daughter. It's not the same. Julia was young, she had time. Julia was 7 years old, I interrupted. 7. And you decided her life wasn't worth $30,000. But a $60,000 car for Daniel was. It was a mistake, she sobbed, a horrible mistake. Do you know what the worst part is? I said. It's not that you denied me the money. It's that 2 months later, I saw that picture of Daniel with his new Audi. Your comment, so proud of my son. He deserves everything. I'm sorry. You're not sorry. If you were sorry, you wouldn't be here asking for the exact thing you denied your granddaughter. Please, I'm your mother. You can't let me die. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless laugh. Julia could have died. She was 7 years old with a treatable illness, and you said you couldn't ruin yourselves for something that might not work. Do you remember those words? She covered her face, crying. I walked to the door and opened it. It's sad, I said, using her own cold voice from years ago. But I can't ruin myself over something that might not work. I heard her gasp. Those are my words, she whispered. Yes. And thank you for the lesson. You taught me that blood means nothing if you don't show up when it matters. And you didn't show up. I'm your mother, and Julia is your granddaughter. That girl you just saw survived without you, grew up without knowing you, doesn't even ask about you. We could fix this. I could get to know her now. Be a part of your lives. Now you want to be a part of our lives. Now that we're doing well. Now that you need something. How convenient. It wasn't like that. Of course it was. Where were you when Julia was losing her hair? When she was vomiting after every chemo session? When I was working 2 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night to pay for the treatment you refused to help with? I didn't know it would be so serious. I told you. I begged you. And you shut the door in my face. She stood up, staggering. Please, don't be like I was. Don't be so cruel. I'm not being cruel. I'm being fair. There's a difference. She walked to the door, stopped, and looked at me one last time, searching for something. Compassion. Regret. I don't know. She found nothing. I closed the door. I heard her crying on the other side for a minute. Then her footsteps faded. I heard an old car start up and drive away. I just stood there for a few seconds. I felt no guilt. I didn't feel satisfaction either. Update for those who asked, it's been 3 months since I posted this. My mother hasn't contacted me again. I don't know if she got the money. I don't know if she's okay. Honestly, it doesn't keep me up at night. A lot of people wrote to me saying I was cruel, that I should have been the better person, that 2 wrongs don't make a right. I get it. But I also received hundreds of messages from people who went through something similar, people who understand what it's like to beg for help and be denied. Did I do the right thing? I don't know, but it was my decision.